Yeah, welcome to whatever we're going to call this. Rives Mitchell, Dave Myrick. We heard from Brent Venables today. Reeves, it's game week, so it's kind of a big deal. On top of the Too Deep finally being released yesterday. You know, man, you and I talked about this all off season, taking our guesses, taking our swings. I don't think a lot surprised us yesterday. Maybe the fact Des Malone is ahead of Gentry Williams over at that right cornerback spot caught my attention. Of course, Gentry being out for a little bit with that shoulder injury probably played into it, but we've heard all along, man, Jaden Jackson is just the truth. This guy stepped on campus and was just a different level that you don't see freshmen, especially defensive tackles, play at. And that came to fruition. He's starting up front on that defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it shocked to see the Jaden Jackson news because we know how highly Brent and the staff have talked about him all offseason. Just, like you said, kind of moves differently from what you see typical freshmen move like. And then, his size is really there 6'2, 312. I mean, that's a guy you can stick right in the middle, and he's going to disrupt the run and hopefully rush the passer pretty well too. So I'm excited about him. I mean, I know Grayson Holton, right behind him, is a guy we're excited about too. Dave, he's a guy you've interviewed a lot this summer. He seems like a guy that's poised to have a really big year on that defensive line. And then, I mean, you go to the third string and it's David Stone. And
Yeah.
Brent came out yesterday and said David Stone is leading all defensive tackles and sacks in the offseason. So, I mean, for a five-star, one of the biggest recruits in OU history to be your third string on that defensive line, that's that's competitive depth, Dave. That's what we were talking about last year, but they're actually starting to build that now, like truly like an elite team does.
Yeah, that's a good point, Reeves. When you got a five-star defensive tackle, the guy that everybody talked about for, over a year, and he's your third string guy, that says a lot for what they've got up there. As Brent said today in the press conference, they're going to try to rotate 10, 11, sometimes 12 guys deep on that defensive line. So probably we're making a little bit too much out of who's starting versus who's not. I think they're all going to get run. Same with linebackers, same with cornerback. But another one, Kenai Walker being listed ahead of Woody Washington at the opposite cornerback spot. I can't say surprised, but yeah, I kind of am, man. Woody's been around a long time, but we kept hearing Walker's name all fall camp, and he gets the nod.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an interesting one to me. I mean, wasn't the biggest fan of Kanai last year. Just I thought he had some lapses in coverage, but I will say that the coaching staff has said all offseason he has really, really improved. So, he gets the nod there, game one starting. And then back to the defensive line for a second. We were talking about defensive tackle for a second, but you slide over to nose tackle. You got Dominic Williams from TCU, who a lot of people think may be one of the best defensive tackles in all of football coming into the year. And then right behind him, you have Dejon Terry, Dave, who we were
Mm-hmm.
super high on last year. And I thought he had a terrific year for OU. Transfer from Tennessee really helped OU establish that size, really in the middle to stop the run, things like that. So those two guys at your nose tackle spot, plus the defensive tackle guys we just listed off, I mean, it's a pretty strong defense on paper. Yeah. If you're going to worry about one part right now, maybe it is the secondary. Obviously, you have Bowman back there who you're very confident about. And you got Peyton Bowen at the other safety who we grade out very, very well. Spears Jennings behind him. So the safety room is very deep. I'm interested to watch the corners though, because I'm confident in a guy like Des Malone, who's come over from San Diego State and has started a lot of football games over there. But at the end of the day, I think we know Gentry is a more talented player than him, guy to guy. I think we would both agree on that. So it's going to be interesting to see, are they holding Gentry back right now because of the shoulder? Do they want to save him for that Tennessee spot more so, or the other two non-conference games? Or is this a true case of Des Malone's beating these guys out? Same with Kenai Walker.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, Des Malone, you're right. He started a lot of games, but the competition jump from the Aztecs out there on the West Coast to what they're going to face now in the Southeastern Conference, that's pretty steep. And there's only one way to see if he can make it, and that's throw him out there. But I mean, the incumbent guys coming into this thing, everybody thought, hey, Woody Washington on one side and Gentry on the other. And that still might be the case. Reeves, again, this is game one. It's a depth chart with a lot of ORs after guys. So we'll see what happens. But that did, it was interesting. That caught my attention, seeing both those cornerback spots not going to who we thought were the incumbents. So, that also speaks to the depth that Brent's talked about at every spot. And on top of that, I mean, The edge guys, Ethan Downs, he's been there 20, 25 years. He gets the nod. We knew that was coming. R. Mason Thomas, good to see him healthy in the rotation, and he shows he can get the start. PJ Adebore, still kind of down there. You keep hearing the guy's name, and he's taking the step, and he looks really good in practice. And yet the depth chart comes out, and he's still kind of where he was. I think a lot of fans, OU fans, are hoping eventually he can work his way up and become a difference maker because the guys they have, we've seen them for years and years. And no knock against them, but they need better production off the edge as far as getting after the passer.
Yeah, when you look at the left side, the Ethan Downs decision to start him, I mean, I think a lot of that comes from him being a senior. He's been around the block. Brent knows the type of player he is. This is another case, though, like the Kanai Walker, Woody Washington stuff. When you just put Ethan Downs and PJ side by side, PJ's the better athlete. PJ's probably the much more dynamic football player, but Ethan Downs has shown very good flashes, especially in OU Texas last year. I mean, he was an animal that game. He was a big factor in OU winning that game down in Dallas. So Ethan Downs has showed it at times this year. Then there were other games, Dave, like Kansas and OSU, where he wasn't really anywhere to be seen. So it's going to be interesting to see how much ground PJ can gain on Ethan Downs at that left end spot. And I feel like in these non-conference games, it's going to be a big shot for PJ to show that he can rush the passer. I know these are going to be lower end, competition that they're playing, but at the end of the day, you get a Big 12 team in Houston, then you get a Tulane team that a lot of people are picking, to maybe even be the 12th seed in the playoffs. So you're going to have your chances early on if you're a guy like PJ to really step up on that roster. But Dave, would you agree with me that it's more of a seniority thing why they're putting Downs there?
Yeah, no doubt about it. You and I have both talked to Downs down in Norman at practice, and the leadership he shows and just the way he talks, he sounds like a coach talking to us. So I think the coaching staff really digs that aspect of his game and what he does for younger guys.
He screams future OU coach after he's done playing.
I mean, dude, you can just see him as an analyst with a cap turned backward on the sideline, right? And give the guy a headset right now. Hopefully he plays really good football between now and then. But I'm with you. I think PJ, I'm just calling it like we see it. I think he's the more dynamic football player, but mentally and grasping the defense and all the assignments he has, he might not quite be there yet to that point. I think he'll get run. Oklahoma's a 44-point favorite against the Temple Owls. They're not good. I think you're going to see a lot of these guys, third and fourth on the depth chart, cycle through this Friday.
Yeah, I would fully agree. Let's round out the defense here a little bit. We've hit on almost everything on this side of the ball. Last thing really is the linebackers. Obviously, you're going to get Stutzman at that Mike linebacker. Right behind him, Kobe McKenzie and Jaron Kinnick. Jaron's a guy who's just really, I mean, falling off the face of the earth is not the right term to put it, but he's a guy that we were really excited about 2 years ago, as a future starter for this defense, but he's kind of been lost in the shuffle, Dave, and it's unfortunate for a kid like him because he's another guy that I think is a very good leader, very vocal player that, quite frankly, you want on an SEC football team. But at the end of the day, Dave, guys like Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, they've just played better football than him, and it's showing you why on the depth chart.
Yeah, I would agree. Rives, I mean, Canik got up in front of us last year, and then Brent echoed the same thing that he had to learn how to stand and how to put his, feet, the footwork of a linebacker, because he'd never played the position before. And I think we were all intrigued by the what if, because the guy's a tremendous athlete. That's why Clemson and Brent wanted him in the first place. But there's just a difference. You watch Kip Lewis, that he doesn't have a false step. That first step is always right. Canik sometimes is just a touch slow. And against these athletes, that first step, if you're not there, they're by you in the blink and it kills you. So, you have to make the move. I hope that Jaron Canik sticks around. That you can see him in a special teams role. And again, I keep going back to it. They play tons of guys on defense. I don't care who they're playing. So I think we're still going to see Canik on the field
Yeah,
along with Kinsey and Lewis. But yeah, no shock to anybody that Kip Lewis eventually gets the nod. I'm also very curious to see what Kobe McKenzie looks like in a game coming up.
for sure. Yeah, I agree with all those points. I fully expect Kanek to be littered on the special teams as well because, he's a guy that's shown on kickoff. He'll go down there, put his head in there, and make a tackle. So he's still going to be an important part of this team. It's just at the linebacker spot, I'm not sure how much burn he's going to get, especially early on. I mean, you've got so many good guys ahead of him. It'll be interesting to see though, because we know Jaron can play some football. He's
Mhm.
struggled at points, but his head is in the right spot, and all the coaches have been very adamant that he's had a good offseason. So that'll be something to follow. Jumping over to Cheetah, Dolby gets the spot there over Osamingo, and then Reggie Powers third. We talked about this a little off the camera about Dolby getting the start here. It makes sense after last year when you put Deshaun McCullough there, Dave, and quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of pass coverage, and you were really struggling in that area. Now, Deshaun's a guy that's struggled with injuries. Brent even said in his presser today that McCullough has been held out of a lot of camp due to nagging injuries. So, he needs to get healthy before the season. But is there any concern with you, a guy like Dolby getting the cheetah nod? We know he can cover, but Dave, he is undersized at 5'11, 190.
Yeah, he is, Reeves. Brent brought that up in his press conference again today. He said Dolby views himself as a 6'2", 225-pound player, and that's what he plays like. We see that. We see it when he comes up and run support. He plays bigger than he is. I still have concerns trying to hold the edge against, a pulling guard or trying to get outside on the tackle in the SEC. That's just not the size that typically you're looking for. But the good news is the depth they have. I think they can kind of create the perfect cheetah out of a couple different guys. I think, yeah, Sam Omasigo is going to be one that we might see in when teams have heavier run sets and heavier personnel, and you get Dolby in and obvious passing downs. He's a very good blitzer, but still going into year three, they haven't found that one guy that's both that can cover but is big enough to do the run support thing. It's a tough ask, but I think they've got the pieces in place to have a good cheetah between a couple of them.
Yeah, I'll be fascinated to watch how Kendall plays on Friday, learning that new position, see how far along he looks out there. The biggest concern with me on that end is just when he's matched up with those physical tight ends, those guys that really are vertical pass catching threats. I mean, I mentioned a guy like Brock Bowers to you, who's the extreme. He's about as good as you're going to get in college football at the tight end position. But Dave, I mean, LSU returns Mason Taylor, one of the best tight ends in the nation. Ole Miss got a pretty good tight end. You look across the board, there's going to be some really tough matchups for a guy like Kendall Dolby just with his size. And I fully believe, Brent, that he plays bigger than he is. We saw that last year, like you were saying, in the run defense. But Dave, I mean, I just struggle to look like when he's going to guard some of these bigger tight ends. I think it's going to be a mismatch nightmare. And I think OU's going to have to, like you were saying, implement a few other guys to see, if they're a better matchup for a guy that may be hurting you throughout the game.
Yeah, and I think we saw that last year to an extent with McCullough. I think they were really hopeful he might be the whole package, big enough to do the run support stuff and cover tight ends, yet fast enough to cover. That really wasn't the case. So we saw Dolby, and I think we'll see the exact same rotation just with another guy. But McCullough, yeah, he's nursing a lot of stuff, and I'm anxious to see him get back healthy and at the will linebacker spot. Can probably do some good things there off the edge, rushing the passer, maybe a stand-up defensive end, but he's got to get healthy. Reeves, he's been have kind of snake bit with his time at Oklahoma.
Yeah, he's no doubt got to get healthy. We saw in the Texas game last year how important he can be to this team and that goal line stand. He was an integral part of that. Really, all four of those runs Texas tried to do. And so, yeah, he's a guy who definitely needs healthy. All right, let's jump over to offense here. Um, I think the big thing everybody was anticipating with the depth chart offensively was the offensive line. Let's just
Mhm.
start going down the list at quarterback. Obviously, we're going to get Arnold at QB1, but then under maybe a little bit of a surprise here. Not really to us because we can get into this in a second, but Michael Hawkins gets the nod at the second string to start against Temple, and then Casey Thompson coming in at the third string. Dave, I'll give my take on this real quick. I just think Hawkins, the potential with him to maybe be a future quarterback at OU, I think that's in the back of Brent's mind and Seth Luttrell's mind right now that we got to get this kid ready for the future to when Jackson Arnold's going to go to the NFL. And let's be honest, Casey Thompson is not the future of this program. Now, if there's a game where Jackson Arnold goes down and you got to choose between one or the two, You might go with Thompson because of the experience, but I get why Hawkins opens as the number 2 on the depth chart.
Yeah, I do too, and I'm with you. Look, they don't really need to see a whole lot of reps from Casey Thompson, man. He's been a
Yeah,
starter at Texas, Nebraska. The dude's played a ton of
maybe that's
football. They know that. Yeah, they know what they've got. If something happens at Jackson, probably be Thompson, like you say, because he's got the experience. But I don't want to take anything from Michael Hawkins by saying that either. I think it's more to it than them knowing what they have with Thompson. To your point, I think they see the future in OU football at a quarterback and a guy that's got a huge arm. He can kill you with his legs. And quite frankly, he is surprised in a good way during his time in Norman that he's done better than I think a lot of people anticipated a true freshman to do. So he earned the backup spot, but it's got multiple layers to it, but don't want to take anything away from Hawkins. He definitely earned it.
Yeah, so Hawkins gets the number 2 nod there. No doubt deserved it, but I think we both agree it could be a little bit of a situational
Right.
game type thing to who's actually going to come in to replace Arnold, whether it be hopefully not an injury or something else where you need another quarterback in there. All right, moving on to running back. This kind of surprised me, Dave. I did not expect an or by Gavin Sawchuk and Javante Barnes. We've heard a lot of good things about Barnes this offseason, like we did last year. Didn't really pan out last year. But again, the chirps have been in our ear about Javante Barnes, so he's having a really, really good camp. But Dave, I'm still a little shocked. I expected Sawchuk to be alone there at the top, and then an or between a Javante Barnes and Sam Franklin.
Yeah, that's your surprise. Mine is Caleb Hicks being buried on the depth chart. I didn't see that coming. Kind of feels like Groundhog Day from right now to this time last year because it was Barnes Sawchuk show, kind of so we thought, and that didn't pan out. Will it this time? I've gone back and watched quite a bit of tape on OU from last year. Rives, they really struggled to run the ball when they wanted to run it. When it was an emphasis, whether it was holding a lead late in the game and trying to pick up, they really struggled to generate that. So I think we're going to see early on this team, throw pretty much the kitchen sink at whoever and establish that downhill run game. We heard Brent say it a couple times today. Downhill running is what they want to be and do. So again, I think we might be putting too much of an emphasis on this depth chart. I think all these dudes are going to play, but it did catch my attention seeing Hicks that low, and yeah, having Javante Barnes right back in the thick of things. When to be honest, 4 months ago, it looked like he was a no doubt transfer out of Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up the play calling to start. I think it's no mystery that OU needs to run the ball effectively this year, and that they're going to try to do it. Just the one thing in my head that's kind of sending me in a twirl is, I mean, when you look at Seth Luttrell in the past of his offensive teams that he's called plays for, he really does lean towards the pass on those
Mm-hmm.
teams. If you put all the metrics in, he's about 60-40 passing. So is that going to change over with all of these good running backs? I know you got a great receiver room too, but you got to really be able to run the ball. So yeah, the play calling is going to be a big thing, and you're maybe not going to see a lot in the first 3 games. I think you're going to see a lot of running the ball in the first 3 games, but those wrinkles are really going to come out in the Tennessee game. I think we're both expecting, unless they have to pull it out earlier than expected. Yeah, Caleb Hicks was a guy that was great in the spring game, and we don't put too much on the spring game, but Dave, he was running through guys. His vision looked on point. He had multiple touchdown runs over 30 yards. So, I mean, this is a guy I think we were both excited about. There's a problem when you have all this talent. I mean, Taylor Tatum down there, he's a guy that's a 5-star. We both were saying last week, you got to find a way to play him one way or another. Maybe it's not running back, maybe it's somewhere else. He's a big guy. And then Xavier Robinson isn't even on this depth chart. So it's just, you have a lot of riches in this running back room. You need guys to stay healthy. But Dave, the number one thing, I do think you need a guy to stick out as the number one. I think we both expect it to be Sawchuk, but whether it be Barnes or someone else, I think you need a clear number one in this offense, a guy that, like you were saying, in spots where the defense expects you to run it, you can still give it to him and get good yardage.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I know that Seth in his play calling in the past has leaned towards throwing the ball. I just wonder if this is a case where he's got a coach that he played under way back in, 99, 2000. It's like, look, we're going to be a little bit more predominantly running the ball, and Seth, obliges. I'm curious if that happens. If it does, they need a number one back. Gavin Sawchuk, to us, we've always thought has the complete package. He's got the speed, he's got the vision. I love Barnes' game. Reeves always have. I just don't think he's got the breakaway speed that defenses have to respect on any given snap. This guy's going to go. They have to when Sawchuk is back there. That's the difference to me. Caleb Hicks, to touch on that point, I thought was another one that we're around the guy a lot in practice in Norman, and he looks like a stud running back, and he showed in the spring game. He's got the tools to do it. So it might just be a case of, again, seniority. Javante Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk have been there. They put in the work. Barnes has done a whole lot to get back to where he is. So let's reward those two with the top two spots on the depth chart. So again, we might be reading too much into it. I hate to keep, echoing that or parroting that, but we have to keep that in mind that all this is fluid and this is just game one. But definitely a few surprises in that running back room on the chart.
All right. Yeah. Obviously, offensive line is the big one to touch on. Let's wrap up the skill positions first, and we can end with the offensive line. Jumping to the tight end room, Dave, I think you could make an argument this is OU's most underrated position on the entire team. Just the top two guys. And then you get to the third guy, you get to the third and fourth, McIntyre and Helms, two guys that were highly recruited and people seem to have a lot of promise for in the OU program. But those top two guys, Dave, I'm really excited to watch this season. Bauer Sharp, I think, blew us away in camp. The first practice we got to watch probably 5 months ago or so, doing the one-on-one drills. Bauer Sharp just makes a ridiculous one-handed catch over Woody Washington in those drills. I mean, all the media members turn to each other like, damn, this kid's a player. So he's a guy that really opens the passing game for OU. When they didn't have this last year, they had a guy at Stogner who really couldn't get vertically on his routes due to injuries, due to other things. But now you have a guy like Bauer Sharp who can stretch the field vertically. Dave, then you add Jake Roberts from Baylor, who had a really good season last year, and he's another pass catcher, good blocker, guy you can implement in a lot of different formations. I'm really excited about this tight end room, Dave.
Yeah, Reeves, I think that the fan base in a couple weeks is going to be right there with you because I completely agree. I think they got two guys you haven't seen in Norman in a long time as far as guys catching the ball from that spot. Jake Roberts, everybody talked about Bauer Sharp after the catch you're talking about, and everybody kind of forgot about Roberts. I'll tell you what, Jackson Arnold, the first guy he mentioned when they asked about tight end was Jake Roberts. So I think they've got a good 1-2 punch. I think two tight end sets will be something that we see. We haven't seen in a while, which will help out running the football, that we also touched on. But you've also got a couple guys that are mismatches for linebackers. They're too big for cornerbacks. So you start mixing in, your skill guys around that and what Sooner fans hope is a good offensive line and good quarterback play. You've got something dangerous, and a tight end that's a mismatch is dangerous. You referenced Brock Bowers. Yeah, that's going to the very top, but that's an example of what a really talented tight end can give you. It's a problem for a defense, and I think Oklahoma has a couple problems for opposing defenses right now.
No doubt we're going to have our eyes on that tight end room all year. I think it's going to totally change this offense, Dave. Just what they lacked last year in that area, I think it just adds a whole nother dimension to this offense. So I'm pumped to see how much Jackson Arnold is looking the tight ends way, how well they're blocking, just everything involved with that group. All right, receivers very quickly, not a ton of surprises, but Brennan Thompson being number one on the list. I know it's an or by him. Nick Anderson's really the starter, and Nick Anderson might not go on Friday, Dave. Brent said, dealing with an injury all off season. They might just want to hold him out for this first game, which I am completely for that notion. I don't think Nick Anderson needs to play against Temple, especially if he's hampered by an injury. But Dave, we were talking about Brendan Thompson the other day. Brent finally mentioned him on the coaches show last night, saying how good of an offseason he's had. But he's a guy that was flying under the radar, and we kept bringing up. Not a lot of other people were bringing him up, kind of lost in the shuffle here at OU. But Dave, he's a guy with arguably the best speed on the team, and he has a chance to be one of the better deep threats in the SEC.
Yeah, Reeves, you and I just talked about this, think on the podcast last week and the one before with Brennan Thompson. Don't forget about that guy. Well, The staff didn't. And what Brent said today in the press conference really got my attention, man. He said Brennan kind of knew the fact he'd been labeled as a vertical threat guy, kind of your Hollywood Brown guy. He didn't like that. He wanted to become a complete wide receiver, really work to refine his game all offseason, learn route trees, run him the right way, his footwork. Apparently, he did it, Reeves, because he's a starting wide receiver at Oklahoma. So I'm with you on Nick Anderson. This is more of a formality. I don't think he's going to go against Temple. He doesn't need to. They don't need to risk that. But no doubt, Brennan Thompson, man, he earned this start, and that's very good news for OU fans because this guy with the ball in his hands is as dangerous as anybody that they have.
No doubt. I'm super excited to watch Brennan Thompson. I think there's a lot of ways you could make him work in this offense, Dave. I think putting him in the slot at times. I think on the outside, burning guys deep. Also, I also think getting him the ball in the backfield in different ways, pitching him the ball, making him a ball carrier at times. I know that didn't quite work out with Farouk last year. You think there's some ways to make Brennan Thompson effective, like you were saying, not just deep. I think there's other ways to make him effective. So
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing on that, man. What a guy does with his speed at wide receiver to a defense and how they have to respect that. They're not going to come up and play bump and run and man to man. They have to give a wide berth because they're scared to death this guy's going to beat them deep. That opens up an entire side of the field. We saw it really help CeeDee Lamb when Hollywood Brown was on the roster at Oklahoma. When you've got two guys like that, I mean, that opens up a lot. So seeing him become a complete receiver is very good news for Oklahoma.
yeah, and like Brandon Thompson's touchdown against Iowa State last year, I don't know if you remember, it was a long, long pass, but he beat the defense by like 10 steps.
Badly,
Go
yes.
back to get the ball and run back forward, and there was still no one catching him. So yeah, kid
Fast guy.
with blazing speed, they'll figure out a way to get him the ball one way or another. And then Angel Anthony third on that list, Dave, on the first. I guess this would be the left side receiver. He's a guy I think we both figure he's going to be important for this team, especially with Jaden Gibson going down. Dave, don't just look at Angel Anthony third on this list and say, oh, he's not the same player he was, or oh, he's not going to play. No, I think he's going to still be an integral part of this offense.
No doubt. Yeah, and that's exactly right. Don't look at third and write him off for the year. He's going to be as involved in this offense catching passes as anybody by the time it's said and done. This is natural, man. You got a guy that blew his knee out. It takes about a year to get back to where you were. He's not there yet. He's not at a year yet. So I think this shows he might be back practicing in the progression, but it takes time, and he's going to be right in there, man. That's another dangerous weapon when he gets back to full speed. I think he already is. It's just a matter of getting game condition. You got to learn to go through your reps again without being winded. And you can only do that in games. And it's been a long time since he's played one. But no, I expect him to be right back in the fold very fast.
Yeah, I think with him, it might take 1 or 2 games to get back into, the football form, get back to football shape. We know game speed is much different than practice speed. So he's going to have some things to work on in these first few games. But Dave, once he gets fully back into the mix, we saw how dangerous he was last year. And quite frankly, he was Dylan Gabriel's favorite target in that first half of the year. So the sky's the limit for a kid like Angel Anthony, the transfer from Michigan, if you forgot.
Yeah.
All right. Rounding out the receiver room, I'm just going to list off the slot and the other side, the right side of the receiver core. Deion Burks, obviously the starter at slot. No surprise there from me or you. He's going to enter the year as, I would say, a top 10 slot in college football. I would be pressed to say top 5, but I think he's got to prove it first.
Agreed.
And then right behind him, Jacquez Petaway, a guy we're excited about and we have been excited about. But Dave, quite frankly, Deion Burks is the more talented player. You got to start him over Petaway. You went to get Deion Burks in the portal for a reason. So he takes the starting position there. And then on the other side of the receivers, Farouk, the starter, right behind him, JJ Hester. Dave, quickly on JJ Hester, what an opportunity it is for him this year. A guy coming into the year, probably didn't expect to play a ton. He knew he was going to get there in there a little bit, but he knew he was still behind a guy like Jaden Gibson on that other side. Now Jaden Gibson goes down, an opportunity arises for JJ Hester. And Dave, he really needs to take opportunity of this because I think he's going to get a lot of playing time, especially early on.
Yeah, I did too. One door shuts, one opens, right? It's what they say. Jaden Gibson goes down. Bad news for him, and I hate it for the kid, but good news for JJ Hester, a guy that was Missouri's top ranked recruit in that class, transfers to Oklahoma. I mean, by all accounts, the guy has all the skills, all the tools you look for in any wide receiver. Size, I think he's 6'4", speed, runs a 4.5. So another dangerous guy that's going to get his shot. But that goes to show you once again at the depth they've got at all these spots. Jaquez Petaway, a very highly touted guy when he came in, struggling to get playing time. And you and I have been excited to watch him, but you're right. You go out and get a guy like Burks, you have to play him, and he hasn't done anything to have that spot taken away. So again, I think we'll see quite a few receivers and slot platoon through this thing. But man, JJ Hester, that's one I'm very excited to see what he can do, because he's very intriguing, kind of a get off the bus first type of guy.
No doubt they're excited about that receiver room as a whole. I mean, we could do a 30-minute episode on each one of these guys, quite frankly.
Yes.
They all have great stories and they're all great players. So it's going to be exciting to watch that. All right, let's get into this offensive line because it's very interesting. And it's going to be the position to watch for OU this year. I mean, I think everybody knows that. You have to have your eye on this line. Dave, it is not an easy thing to do to replace 5 starters on an offensive line, especially going into the big, bad SEC conference. So OU did what they could in the portal, but at the end of the day, it's just a tough thing when you're replacing 4 or 5 starters and they don't have the gel
Right.
of with each other last year. It's just going to be a tough thing. So at that left tackle spot, you get Michael Tarkin, the transfer from USC, originally at Florida. Dave, he was getting a lot of playing time at Florida, went down to play with Caleb and Lincoln in SoCal last year, just did not work out for him for whatever reason. OU says, we will take you and we will start you. So the 6'6", 313 redshirt senior comes in and gets that left tackle spot.
Yeah, that's and they moved Sexton to guard. I know you're going to bring that up in a minute, but they did that to open up a tackle spot to get Tarkin in, and that's telling. It shows that they said, hey man, this is a guy that's got to be on the field, and we'll even move a returning starter to a different spot in order to do it. So that gets my attention right off the bat. They see something in Tarkin they like. That's good news. That's protecting the blind side of Jackson Arnold. So you want your best over there, and I think he's got the experience you mentioned at Florida and the size. So apparently they see the skill to go along with that. But that's another spot to where we'll have to watch how it goes. If he gets beat in the first couple games, is that a spot Bill says, nah, let's try to get Sexton back there. He's got the experience, but the fact that Tarkin gets the nod to start, that says a lot about what he's done since he's arrived in Norman Rives. And it's going to be important. Like I say, that's Arnold's blind side. So a very important spot on the field.
Yeah, and Tarkin seems like one of the most popular players amongst the coaches, excuse me, this offseason. Brent is always bringing him up. Bill Bedenbaugh, when he's been interviewed, has brought up Tarkin's name plenty of times. So, Dave, he seems kind of motivated after kind of a wasted year at USC last year. A year he probably expected to walk in there and start for a Heisman winning quarterback, and it did not go his way. He's had to change some things this offseason, but comes in very inspired. The one thing I'm worried about with that left tackle spot, Dave, like you were saying, I know Sexton could slide there, but there's not a lot of depth behind Tarkin.
No,
Look
no,
right
there's not.
behind it. It's Logan Howland, who's a freshman.
Right,
That's not
right.
want to throw into the fire early. Yes, you could move Sexton back over, but then what do you do at the guard spot then? So, Dave, if they have to do a lot of shuffling early on, it might not be a good sign for this team.
That won't be good news. And to your point about a wasted year at USC, I'm sure there are a lot of players out there who feel that way about playing at USC last year. But
No
uh,
doubt.
to that point, Tarkin, they just can't afford a lot of injuries up front, man. That's gonna be something to keep an eye on. They're gonna need luck. They're gonna need the breaks, so to speak. And if they get it, I think this group has a chance to gel and be really good. But they're at a spot where, man, if depth takes a hit due to injury, it's going to be interesting to watch, no doubt.
Yeah, so at that guard spot, like we were saying, Sexton is right there. Heath Ozada right behind him. And then you got Eddie Pierre Lewis, Dave, EPL, the big recruit for OU on that offensive line. I don't think we're going to see him for maybe a couple of years, but he's a guy to keep your eye on, especially in practice, see how he's developing. Sliding over to center, Branson Hickman gets the nod. I think I'm going to go ahead and say this is my most confident spot on the offensive line right now. Hickman's blown me away in camp. Rewatching SMU tape from the last couple years, he's the guy that always does his job, Dave, and is a really, really good run blocker. I think struggles a bit more in the passing game, but that run blocking is really, really solid for Branson. And he also just seems like a really good leader. and a guy you want to be the center of your offense coming over from SMU with all that experience. So, any thoughts on the center spot?
Well, I mean, it was telling to us, right? The first availability or maybe second of the season, we get Branson Hickman to talk. And then we thought, that's interesting. This dude just got here from SMU, and this is somebody the coaches and staff elect to come and represent the program to the media, to us. So that told us right off the bat the guys, come in and done the right thing. And apparently he told us in that same scrum, he was working out at center, and we were like, wait, I thought that was Bates. But apparently Bill B likes what he saw in Branson Hickman. I think he's got the experience, talent. Obviously, you've watched him play at SMU. The guy can move. He's got quick feet, and I think heavy hands, which will come in very handy for a center. And his lateral movement looks good on tape. So I think they have what they want at center. And I also think getting Bates reps there all spring will pay dividends if something happens that they need have an injury, or you got to test that depth. At least you got a couple guys behind Hickman that have played that spot.
For sure. Yeah, I agreed with all those points. Then you jump over to right guard, right tackle, Vibechi. We're gonna have to learn his last name, Dave.
Go ahead, Reeves, say it.
I'm not even gonna try. I'm gonna
Give
go
it a
with.
shot. Give it a shot.
But what I do know about the kid is he was the freshman All American at North Texas. Really big portal get for this team. And Dave, he's a guy. If you read on some message boards and other things, he's a guy that some people around the program think could be a potential one and done at OU.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the guy's measurements, he looks like your prototypical, NFL offensive lineman. And it was one of the kind of under the radar gets at Oklahoma in the portal this year, because I think your average fan looked and saw North Texas and they're like,
Yeah,
that's a depth guy. But
but All
those
American.
all America, those of us that actually know football, we're like, wow, that's a big get, a lot of experience, a lot of talent. So you have to, right, you see that we knew experience, talent, big get, but then you have to earn it. A lot of times that flames out. You hear all this stuff in the portal, a guy comes in and he's buried on the depth chart. This guy actually did. He stepped on campus and has earned a spot on the offensive line. I think he's rock solid as Branson Hickman, to be honest with you. I think those two I probably have the most faith in right now up on the front.
Yeah, I would agree with that take. That side of the line is well, it's the center and the right guard, but you got a lot of experience there. You got an All American at the right guard spot, and then you got a guy in Hickman who has been around the block and a really good SMU team. He was the starter all season on one of the best offenses in the nation as well. So pretty good two guys there. And then right tackle, you go Jake Taylor, who is a guy that's kind of been waiting his turn. Redshirt sophomore, he was in that same class as Sexton. Just again been waiting his turn to play. But he's got an oar by his name with Spencer Brown, who is the Michigan State transfer. So Dave, I don't know if they really know who they want at right tackle right now. I think that's going to be more of a trial by error thing. But I will say, going out and getting a guy like Spencer Brown for at least having depth behind Taylor. I mean, Brown's a 6'6", 330 former starter at Michigan State. That gives me confidence. At least they have one of two guys that can maybe figure it out through a long haul of a season.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think we'll see. They might rotate series the first game. I don't know, because they're going to need to find out if there's an or next to both of them. They want to know what's what. I think you might have different strengths. I think Taylor might excel in your pass blocking, where Spencer Brown is more of your motor downhill run guy. So that they might see what they like that fits their offense best. But I like Jake Taylor, man. I have since he came in. He didn't transfer out like a lot of guys do nowadays. He actually waited his turn, and he's got it now. And I'm interested to see what he looks like Friday night. And if he excels and Bill B can stick with the same lineup, that's going to be really good news for OU fans. If you start seeing guys like Brown cycle through, probably wouldn't make too much of it the first game. But if that is a trend, games into the season, that doesn't bode well. You want to see this same five play together for as long as they can before that jump into the SEC.
Yeah, we saw that come back to bite OU last year when they were kind of trying to shuffle the line at different times in the year. And Dave, that's a really hard thing to do, especially during an OU Texas game where you throw a guy into the fire of the biggest rivalry in college football, and he's having to, sort himself through that. But yeah, you hope to see at least a combination of the same 5 or 6 guys most of the year. We both know that's probably not going to happen, and they're probably going to have more of a trial by error system. But, hopefully at least 4 of the 5 guys on that offensive line are year to year starters and are guys that you can lean on throughout the whole season. All right. Lastly, let's get over to the specialists. Few surprises here, a little bit. I don't think we were too shocked that Keltner's getting the opening job over Schmidt to be the kicker. Dave, Zach Schmidt has the talent. He has the leg. He
Yeah.
knows how it does. It's a confidence thing with him. We've watched so many kickers at this university with great talent, but it gets into their head at certain times and they're never able to recover. Now, I'm not going to go that far with Schmidt yet because Brent has said he's made over 90% of his kicks in camp. He's looked really good, but they are going to go ahead and give it to Keltner. Dave, any shock there? Are you happy with the decision? How are you feeling about that?
I'm indifferent to it, Reeves. If Brent's saying that Schmidt's looked awesome and he's made 90% of his kicks, you would assume that would translate to be the starter. But obviously, they're still seeing something there or not there with Schmidt to go ahead and go with Keltner. But I mean, Schmidt year before last was steady Eddie. He was reliable. He was consistent. Like you say, last year, it's just like the shanks in golf, man. Once you've got them, you've got them. And if that stays in your head as a kicker, that's bad news. But the good news here is they have 2 guys I think that I won't say trust right now, but they believe in. I'll put it that way. I think they believe both of them are capable of doing the job. So it's not a situation where it's Schmidt or bust or Keltner or you're screwed. They at least have a couple options if things start to go sideways. You bring in one that doesn't work and go back to the other. You hope that doesn't happen if you're an OU fan, but I think they've got a couple guys that can get the job done if need be. But the fact Keltner beat out, a guy making 90% of his kicks, that speaks volume. He must be pretty good.
Yeah, it's got to bode well, certainly in some category, but it comes down to the games. Who's making their kicks in games? If Keltner goes through a streak of missing 2, 3, 4 in a row, I think Schmidt's going to be pulled off that bench and be ready to go to take the next kick. So, you hope Keltner runs away with the job.
Right.
Really, you hope he has a terrific year, but you just never know in the kicking department because again, so much of it is mental. Um, Getting over to punter, Josh Plaster started the year at punter last year. Dave, he now finds himself at third on the depth chart. Punting was a real issue for OU last year. I mean, a real issue. They were not able to flip the field until they made a switch at that position and put in the lefty senior, now senior, number 48, Luke Elzinga. Dave, he was a really bright spot for this team down the stretch last year for a team that really couldn't flip the field with Plaster. But not a shock to me that Elzanga wins this. A little bit of a shock to me, though, that Plaster comes in at number 3 behind Ashton Logan on the punter list, though.
Yeah, not only could they not flip the field and punting wasn't good until they went to look, special teams in Norman wasn't good last year.
Yeah.
Top to bottom, it should have cost them the OU Texas game. I mean, special teams alone killed them in the Red River rivalry. So something had to be done. I think, yeah, when they went to Elzinga last year, you saw night and day difference between not only length of punts, but hang time, letting your coverage get down the field and then have time to get down there and defend it. So good things there. And we all kind of wondered, like, where the hell has this guy been? They see it, they know it. He was kind of called their long distance punter. Well, you probably need that more often than you don't. If a guy can shank one and drop it in the 20 and he can kick it 60 yards, I'd go with him. And they obviously decided to do that. So I think special teams has been a big emphasis this offseason for Brent Venables and company. One more thing on special teams we didn't touch on is Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen, both being returners this year on special teams. Reeves, a lot of people like it. If I'm an OU fan, I'm a little leery, man. I don't know if you risk, guys that are dynamic position guys to do that. Maybe in your big games, but against like a Tulane, that's risking a whole lot putting those guys out there.
Yeah, and Brent had a quote about this, I think, about Bowman returning kicks, basically saying there's a chance you can get hurt on any play. So we want to maximize the talent we have out on the field any play because we know, an injury can happen on literally any play. So that was kind of his reasoning behind that. I think we both agree Billy Bowman could be dynamic back there. But yeah, I do agree with you that you are taking a risk. I mean, I think Brent's underlining it a little bit. It is a risk to stick a guy back there to return every play when he's arguably your most important player on defense. So kick returner, I'm a little weary on. I'd rather put a guy like Sam Franklin back there.
Yep.
Has blazing speed, but he's third on the depth chart at running back. So
Yep.
if he goes down, you're able to recoup. If a Billy Bowman goes down, not a lot you can do to solve that. He's one of the best safeties in college football. So yeah, I agree with you on that. And then on punt returner, I'm not worried about Bowman back there with that. I think he needs to be back there on punt return. I think he has a chance to be dynamic. And we saw it in a couple games last year, him housing punts, him taking punts back into enemy territory. Dave, that's just such an added element to your team. If you have a guy back there that when a team's punting, they'd rather punt it out of bounds and shank it than really kick it to your dynamic punt returner. So I really like the move with Bowen at punt returner. Kick returner, I am more in agreement with you that I'd rather it be a Sam Franklin back there, a JJ Hester, someone along those lines, not really a Billy Bowman or Farouk.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on Peyton Bone as far as punt return goes. I think you can probably find guys dynamic that are in other areas that can return those, and you risk injury with. I don't want to say expendable players, but man, those are two very important positional pieces for Oklahoma. Your starting safety. So, hey, we don't get paid millions of bucks to make these calls. Just observations. It's a risky play, but hey, risk versus reward. If Bowen houses a punt that ends up winning OU Texas, we'll look or I'll look stupid, and then they'll look like amazing coaches. So we just got to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. So that basically wraps up going over the depth chart. Any final thoughts on this thing? Again, it's going to change a lot. It's going to change game to game. The depth chart just for the Temple game is not going to be the final one for SEC play. But, what's your overall overarching opinion on this first official depth chart?
Uh, we've touched on about all of it. I mean, Jaden Jackson, we kept hearing he's looked different, and that comes to fruition as he's starting. The cornerback spots, as we said, were a little surprising, but like you just said, don't read too much into it. Everybody's going to play. I just, looking ahead to Temple, I think with the depth chart in particular, if you're an OU fan, you want to see as many guys cycle through this thing as possible. You want to see the threes and the fours come in because that'll mean that OU's doing very well in the game, and they should. They're 44-point favorites against a Temple team that's just not very good. So, yeah, you're going to see all these guys listed. If your favorite player is not one or two, don't worry about it. They're going to play, I promise you. And if they do against Temple, that's good news. It means Oklahoma is handling business. But the main takeaway, man, is just every spot seems to have pretty good depth. I mean, to elite depth, guys that you're not going to miss. You're not going to skip a whole lot of beats when they come in as the two or three. So that's something heading into year three that is different. I'll say what is the same heading into year three. They don't have the exact right guy at Cheetah. They have not found that fix yet. The mixture of both, big enough to defend the run and fast enough to, defend the pass. But I think they'll piece that together with a couple different dudes and keep looking for it in one guy.
Yeah, completely agree. I would say my overall thought for this depth chart would be just it's cliche at this point, but the depth at a lot of positions where OU hasn't had it in the past. I mean, you know, we're we're a little down on this Cheetah cornerback room a little bit just because of where guys are listed, but I think we're both in agreement that there's so much talent at these positions. There's guys that are backups right now that can step up everywhere on this defense. Then you look at the receivers, the tight ends, halfbacks. I mean, there's the same opportunity on that side of the ball. Just guys that we're really high on that we believe that could make noise in an SEC conference and be really good players for OU. So I give Brent a lot of credit for the recruiting. I mean, I think he has hit a home run on his recruiting thus far at OU, getting talent at so many positions where they just quite frankly lacked it in the past. So that's my thoughts on the matter. Last thing we want to get into the I guess announcement of Toby Keith. A little tribute for Toby Keith going to be played between the third and the fourth quarters at Gaylord Memorial Stadium. Dave, I don't think they've announced the song yet, though. I think we're both happy about this decision. What song are you going to be wanting to sing along to?
Probably won't be. I should have been a Cowboy. I doubt they'll go with that one in Norman.
Two fans commenting that.
Yeah, the red solo cup I think would probably be the most fitting because there'll probably be a couple of those in the air. You'll have to let me know what it is because I'll be happy to announce it. The tandem you're watching right now will be on the call for Mid-Del football all year, Del City, Carl Albert, Midwest City football all season every Friday, except this Friday because Oklahoma decided to play football on a Friday. How dare they? So you'll be at that game, and I'll be calling high school football. But you got to let me know which Toby Keith song they pick. I'm really happy that they're doing something for Toby. He was a great Sooner and a great guy.
Yeah, and sometimes these things feel gimmicky, whether it be someone passed or some big deal happened and a school feels like they have to do something. This just doesn't feel like that at all. I mean, with how important Toby was to the state, how much he resonated with OU football, just how much of an ambassador he really was for OU at different times in his life. Seems very fitting to do this. And this just feels like it was the 100% right decision by OU. So, yeah, I'll send you an update text on that when it's in between the third quarter, fourth quarter. But very happy with that decision. Yeah, and I'll be on the call with you next week for whatever matchup we have then. But it's high school football season officially, and I haven't been to a game yet. I need to get out and maybe see the Chargers play soon. But I'm excited to have football back, Dave.
Yeah, I am too, man. High school football is where it starts. Nothing like small towns on Friday nights, especially in Oklahoma and Texas. That kind of kicks off every football weekend. And you got your college in red zone with Scotty Hansen on Sunday to wrap that up. Monday Night Football. We're here. We made it. Finally. Seems like forever. We've been talking about it.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Again, OU will kick on Friday, and I'm hard pressed to say I'm not even sure I know the game time. Is it a
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock kick?
6 o'clock. Be nice and toasty in Norman.
You're positive on that?
I'm positive on
Yep,
that.
you're right. 6 o'clock. CBS has OU 42.5 point favorites.
Whew.
That line, you'll
Whew.
probably get a different line depending on what book you're on because it's gonna balloon, Dave. I could see it right around kickoff being about 50 points. So if you do want to bet on the Sooners, I'd advise betting early.
Yeah, I'd advise not taking. I wouldn't give up 44, 42 points in this one, man. I think it's a game you're going to see youngsters cycle in towards the end. One of those where the team eventually finds the end zone because they're going against twos and threes and makes up a little ground. But man, 40 points plus, that is a big spread.
I think I agree with you on that. I mean, it's always tough at the end in those big spreads with the backups in. You never know what's going to happen. But I do think a wager on Oklahoma first half in this game could have some serious value.
Probably have to agree with that, Reeves. I'm sure we'll talk more about those details as we get closer to kickoff.
Yeah, for sure. And
What do you think about this Friday night
fast.
college football in Norman anyway?
Yeah, true. We'll get our prediction podcast. That'll drop on Wednesday, most likely. We'll predict our Heisman winners, our CFB playoff, our conference standing. So we think it's going to win the Big 12. What does Dave think about Deion Sanders in Colorado? We're going to get into all of it here coming up on Wednesday. But good episode, Dave. It was good to talk to you again.
Good talking to you. Just back from a hunt. I've got to unload the truck and man, heal the body. The briars and thorns are out in force down south, man. I got to get some band-aids on, take a shower, and hang out with the wife and dogs tonight.
Well, you enjoy yourself tonight and just say a quick prayer of thankfulness because God did not make the Texas Rangers play on this Monday. Thank you for that. We'll be out, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, I'll be sure to hit that one. Well, we'll do it again by yeah, we're gonna do this Wednesday an episode. Everything you just said, playoffs and Heisman's, dark horses, who might surprise this year. Talk a little Big 12 too, man. I know that there's been some pettiness with Brett Yormark and then the outgoing stuff, but you and I both think they're going to be a very fun league to watch this season.
No doubt. I mean, behind the SEC, I think it's my second conference that I'm most excited to watch. I know you could easily say the Big Ten, the ACC even, but Dave, this Big 12, it's anybody's ball game. Utah is the favorite going in, but I think we both know a team like OSU at plus 700 to win the conference is a quality bet most years.
Yeah, I mean, what does Ollie Gordon do? Is expectations too much for the guy? The offseason troubles, do they mount, and start to become a distraction? It's Bowman, how does he play? He's back for his 19th year in college. Does he take the leap to become an elite quarterback? All kinds of stuff to keep an eye on. I'm with you, man. It's going to be a fun league to watch every week. It's going to be fun matchups, whether it's the Kansas schools, the Arizona schools. You got the Silver Holy War with BYU and Utah. That's going to be reinserted in the league. And do I think there's a national championship contender out of the league? No, but I think still top to bottom, it's going to be one of the best and funnest leagues to watch every week.
Well, I mean, not to play devil's advocate, but there technically is going to be a national championship contender in that league because they're getting one team in.
Yeah,
They're
automatic. That's right.
getting,
Do I think they'll win it? I guess would be more apropos. No, I don't.
well, we'll get into that next week, but for myself, Reeves Mitchell, for Dave Myrick, that does it.